will develop over time, and skills that, even though I think we spend a lot of time on the computer, and you probably will in your future, will be useful to you. There's always, feels like no matter what, in my journey as an architect, there's always a moment where I just have to do something by hand. So it does kind of still seem to be relevant. So first thing, all right, I've got some scales. I'm going to hand them out. Does everybody know what a scale is? And I was going, well, you should know. Yeah, I was going to say, you took 25, didn't you? Who's already taken interior design 25? That's the question I should ask. Ah, okay. Well, you don't get a scale. But the rest of you guys, no, you should. Here. So, look at, I brought some to kind of look at. So share in your groups. Scale. So all
Turned down. Rejected.
Scales. Oh, you were thinking like a weight scale. Yeah. It's. You see the scale. So what level of
I remember having these as a kid. I'm like, what is this? Just a weird ruler.
It's a weird ruler. That's what it is. It's a weird important ruler. You know your colleagues are becoming official architects when they walk around with this number. It's very important. I'm actually going to borrow your model for a second. Anyone else want to hold the scale? Scale. You've got a scale. See? Official architect right there.
With all her belt.
Infiltrating. Anyway, so it looks like you have drawn this to a scale. Have you or no?
Yes.
What scale you drew it to? Do you know? Or is it just to the squares?
Each little square is a foot.
Very good. Each little square is a foot. So that's to a scale. You brought some grid paper. Totally works.
Okay.
No, I mean, scale measurements arbitrary.
That's what she gave us, and then
Yeah.
we had to like put it on 11 by 17, so
Right.
it was like super shrunk it down. So everyone kind of has a little bit different depending on how.
And that's why this little puppy comes in, because that's what you don't want in architecture, is having a slightly different,
Okay.
like, you know, because then you can't really compare apples to apples, because if somebody's is slightly larger and someone's slightly smaller, and then you're like, wait, which one's right? So that's why this thing was invented. Remember in that first grade you got to like measure by paper clip? Remember doing that? Like take 10 paper clips and measure something. That's really all measuring is, right? It's an arbitrary size. So the United States, and I think only the United States now, has agreed that an inch is this big, right? You can find the inch side. So everybody look at the one that says 16. That's just a regular old ruler. Just a regular old ruler. Nothing fancy about that. Besides, it says 16. It says 16 right there on the edge. Right there. Just a regular old ruler. No, not everyone. No. Because everyone is slightly different size. But roughly, yes. And that's probably why the kings were like, this is an inch, right? Because they were like, this is the size of it. So all scales is like fancy ways to divide up a ruler. You're not actually changing measurements. You're just taking and making it easier for you to figure out the size of things. So you can always, the easiest measurement to do is do 1/16 of an inch equals 1 foot. So if you go to the 16, one of the little dashes there in the inch, imagine that little tiny line, right? It's like this big. You can create a scale for your model and imagine that that is exactly 1 foot. Okay, so that becomes a foot. Becomes this basically. So that becomes this. We have to shrink it. Now we're shrinking it to a very specific amount. That's all a scale does. So like this 1/16 of an inch right there, that little thing becomes 1 foot if you are working at 1/16 of an inch equals a foot. And that is in actuality 1/192nd of an actual size, believe it or not. So like if you imagine you took something like this room or that room and you're shrinking it down 192 times, that's 1/116 of an inch, okay? Another popular scale is 1/8 of an inch is a foot. So you could still use this guy, the 16, right? Because you know what an 1/8 of an inch is, right? Okay, I hope so. that's where that second tick is, right? There's 8 of them in the inch, right? Maybe not, it's okay, it's been a while. If you get 2 of these together is 1/8. That's 1/8, because if you can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get to an inch. Okay, so 2 of them together is 1/8 of an inch. That's 1/8 of an inch. But say that's too complicated. Now you're like having to double your lines and you're counting by 2s and oh my God, my brain hurts. So they made this magical tool that now you can flip it around, and if you find the red side, I think most of you have it, or if you don't have a red, it's okay. I know, it's easy, that's why they gave it a color. It says, it's very helpful. It's 1/8. Look for the corner that says 1/8. 1/8. Okay, you see that? Find the one that says 1/8. Got it? So all that is just doing a little bit of math for you. Notice these little ticks. They kind of look like 1/8 inch marks. They sure are 1/8 inch marks. Now when you're like, I need something that's 4 feet wide, because I'm drawing a 4 foot wide wall or something. I can count 1, 2, 3, and there's the number 4, and that's 4 feet. So I don't have to, I can do it also over here, and I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. That works too, but it's harder because I don't get the 1, 2, 3, and 4. On that side, they've given me 4 feet, 8 feet wide, 12 feet wide, 16 feet wide, 20 feet wide, so on and so forth. So I'm going to tell you this, and then you're instantly going to forget it, and then as soon as you try to do it, you're going to be like, what? You know, and that's okay, because that's totally how scales work. It took me probably like, I don't know, a year of graduate school to figure it out, and I'd done already 3 projects. So that's just anyway. But it's actually, it's really, really helpful. It's just, once somebody explained to me like, oh no, all it's doing is just moving the numbers around. See, the ticks are still 1/8 of an inch. I was like, oh. So as you go around, and you see on 1/8 there's actually a 1/4 too going from the other direction. So that means that every 1/4 of an inch, and notice it says 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on and so forth. That means that's 2 feet, that's 4 feet, that's 6 feet, that's 8 feet, so on and so forth. It's just a thing. So what we have to figure out is roughly what this is. So you said each one of these little squares is supposed to be a foot, okay? So I could be like, well, I suppose the first one to do is like the little one, right? I could start at the 16th of an inch and be like, all right, it's not quite a 16th. It's a little bigger than a 16th, because if you come and you measure it, it's just a smidge over. So it's not at a 16th of an inch, so we know it's a smidge over. What was the next one up? I think it was an 8th. So let's go to the 8th, and then let's measure it again. Ah, dang it. It's not an 8th either.
Beans.
It's like beans, you got nothing. So it's somewhere between a 16th of an inch equals a foot and an 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. It's some magic number, probably like 1.5 in the middle. So there's one more, let's see if I can not sound like a complete moron. There's 3/32 of an inch would be 1/16 plus a smidgen, because it's 3/32. So that's why this is useful, because sometimes people are like, I don't want an 1/8 and I don't want a 16th, I want something in between. Well, you end up with 3/32, and that's an oddball size, and if you had to count that on this ruler size you have, you'd be driving yourself crazy. So let me see if it's 3/32. You might be golden there. It is! So, this model is at a really awkward size. It's at 3/32 of an inch equals a foot, but it is still scale. So, if you're like, okay, great, each one of these is a foot. Okay, how thick are these balls? So you can find your 3/32. Everybody find that 3/32. And if I measure it, yeah, that foam core is just about 2 feet wide, and that's fine. That'll work for a while. Does that make sense? Everybody understand how to use the scale? So Professor Kelly has given you a grid paper that's a scale. It's just a bit of an oddball scale. It's 3/32. I'm telling you, I'm calling you out. Kelly, Laura's my friend. Calling you out. So that's fine. So if you guys have a scale and you're gonna work at this, those of you in the group will be fine. You'll have to remember that that's when you want to figure out your feet. It's on that one. Okay. Anyway, that's a scale. So when you're modeling, scale is incredibly important because sometimes you're modeling really big things and sometimes you're making them really small. And it gets really confusing if you're using multiple scales because then in the end, your people are gonna be too small, your room is gonna be too big, your objects are gonna be somewhere in between, it's gonna be confusing. So pick a scale, okay? I personally really like the 1/4 inch scale. I find that's easy to work with. That means 2 feet's about like that, so 1/2 inch. It's not too big, it's not too little, it tends to be pretty easy. This model I brought, so we can pass that model around, I'm pretty sure that's a 1/8 inch model. If you could measure, what could you measure to figure that out? I see little people on it.
Doorway.
Could you what?
Doorway.
You measure a doorway, very good. Or you could also, in this case, measure a person, because I don't think the student made the doorway the correct size. So, I know the little people are though, because she paid for them, and they should be the right size. So, we could measure one using our 1/8 and make sure it's right. Let's see, I think that's right. Let me see. So people usually about 6 feet tall, yet that seems right. So that's a 1/8 inch model. Just to give you a sense, that at 1/8 of an inch, that means this building and these walls are probably very tall. 30 feet. Oh yeah. So different kinds of buildings. 1-story building and nearly 3-story building. So that's okay. That makes sense. Any questions on scale?
Do you know if they have 3 30-second people?
Yes, you do have 330-second people. You can go to Blick and online and you can find 330-second people, I think. Yeah, they do them at all different scales. I mean, it's not common, but it's not impossible. I think it's, it is standard on the board. So, yeah. And if you don't, imagine that the person's, you could sort of err maybe on the big side. All right, cool. So fractions of an inch. You're doing it 330-seconds. Okay, orthographic plans. Oops. This is not working at all.
You know the reason why
Metric. Because the rest of this is US only.
I was gonna say, when you're making models, right? Sending you plans to do that. Like this. You know what? I've used a laser cutter. Have you used the laser cutter yet? No? There's a laser cutter in the Carlson Center that you can use. It's 12 inches wide by 24 inches long, so it would probably accommodate something like this. The laser cutter is really helpful when you're doing complicated cuts. It's actually not that helpful when you're just doing straight cuts, because by the time you lay everything out like that in your AutoCAD file, you're like, oh, well, I've already spent hours doing that. What's the point? Just cut out squares, right? So, but it can be done. A lot of times you'll see these like templates online that are kind of fun. Here's some basic tips. So, modeling materials. It looks like you guys are using foam core. I've got a whole bunch of materials over there. Let's pass them around. I really prefer cardboard, to be honest. Yeah, you can pass them around. I like cardboard. We also have this kind of basswood board, which is really nice, but very hard to cut. This is called chipboard. It comes in a number of different thicknesses. The trouble with chipboard, as you can imagine, is you wouldn't be able to make a thick wall like that. You'd have to figure out some way to kind of laminate it together, or you'd have to do one side of the wall and the other side of the wall, so it's a little extra work. But it'll be great for your little displays. Here's an example of a cardboard model that somebody put together. Familiar from your class. Here's another example of a cardboard model that somebody put together with a little bit of chipboard on the outside. So that's kind of neat.
And use it fresh.
And then these are little sticks. So these are nice because they actually come in pre-done sizes. So like, if you are really making like a sign, you wouldn't want your, if you're at 330-seconds. Your signpost isn't going to be more than like 6 inches wide, right? So these are actually accurate. So they use these a lot of times if you're actually trying to make like a real, the size of a sign as opposed to the size of a building. Like this is probably the size of the supports of your sign. And you can buy these, yeah. Yeah, little basswoods at Blick. Little bass, yeah. You guys can go in. You probably don't need like a whole. You probably just could use one packet everyone. But these are kind of helpful for little modeling things. That's why I showed that one. It has a little bit of everything. So one thing I really recommend is to consider sustainability and waste. So actually our department has moved away from foam core completely. We have some extra laying around, so we're still using it, but we aren't actually buying it anymore.
That's Tony Starks.
Because it adds up. I mean, you guys don't have nearly the kind of waste that we do, but it definitely adds up. So a lot of these materials are recycled, a lot of them are recyclable, which is great. Okay, so very important when you're modeling, and do you guys mind if I just do it here? I think here everybody can see me a little better than there maybe. Sorry, you're at the main table. So first thing we need when we model every time is a cutting board, or cutting mat. You never want to model on a table or on, well, if you look carefully, you can see people have done it on the floor, but that pretty much will very quickly like ruin your furniture. So make sure you have a cutting mat. What's also really important is that you use the correct body position. So I don't actually think I have a knife because I couldn't find one.
Oh.
I have a stuff here. Can I
Yeah.
borrow it?
We have cutting mats back there too. Yep.
That's part of it. It's great. And a score tool.
So, just like, I like to describe it like you're dancing. It's what they spend a lot of time on in dance is posture, right? Posture, the way you stand, all those things. So all these things are important when you're modeling because modeling itself is a physical activity. I like this room because all the tables are down where they should be for modeling. They're down below your waist. So first thing I don't know if you've been up to Mariposa, but if you notice the desks are like this high, it's really kind of annoying. That is not good. You don't want to model at your kitchen bar counter. You should always model waist down because you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to be up here. You have no leverage, and all your cuts are going to be wonky done. Okay? So always down. Always metal blade, right? Always position yourself over the work. I like to cut towards myself this way, and they teach you this in cooking school too. It's actually safer to cut towards yourself. If you're cutting away, you're gonna curve your blade. So imagine how your arm rotates. However your arm rotates is how the blade's gonna wanna rotate. So you kinda wanna force it to not do that. And one way of doing that is by elbow out, arm up, and notice my fingers kind of gripping like this and away, and then I always kind of hold with my pinky, and many small cuts will do it. You want to do. So you always want to be above your work. Really try to avoid, and this happens when you get tired, like doing like this, you can slip and go right across your fingers. I've done that before. Doing like, this, you're off a corner and you're sort of doing, like this is another one I see a lot. People will come and they'll slice this edge of it, and I've done that before. Done it all. I went to art school, then architecture school. I got it's all down. So I think really just focusing on your posture and being really above your work is really important, okay? Your tool angle also matters. So with cardboard and you did a nice job here, you scored, that's very good. So there's a thickness, right? If you want to miter corners like that, that's mitered corners. See how clean those corners are? Super sweet, super clean. In order to do that, remember, you're just gonna eyeball it, and you're gonna have to kind of go at an angle. But what's hard about it, and you'll get used to it, it's like anything you do physically, tool use, slow and steady, and then you can get a nice angled cut. Cardboard takes a minimum of 3. You have a really nice sharp blade, probably 4. This is not a great tool because what happened? I can't get all the way to the end, right? So I was looking for the ones with the cork back. I don't have them anymore, but basically you end up with a nice mitered edge, The miter joins up with the miter. You have this like beautiful thing. The trick is really just remembering, just being really intentional. I forgot to say on the slide, breathe. Make sure you breathe. Because and that's how you're gonna, I see a lot of students, doing this, it's just like, just calm down, just breathe. And remember, it's gonna take you 4 times. So just do it 4 times. And then you end up with this beautiful cut, and then you don't have to do it again. Because the more you do it, you're gonna get frustrated if you have to make that cut like 14 times to make it right. And then when you try to glue it on and it's not right, it's just gonna make you mad. So postures are really, I think, really important, and the students that I think have good posture always seem to do the best thing, or do the best modeling. So that's the first one. By the way, and the onion grip. Yeah, so did you guys see the onion grip? You guys know about the onion grip? Try not to hold it like this. This is less safe than this. Has anyone ever learned how to, you cut an onion, you hold it like that, right? Mm-hmm. That's gonna prevent you, because if the blade comes along, it's just gonna knock your knuckles. It's not gonna the blade won't touch you. Okay, so holding like this, your hand is gonna get tired. That's the way you wanna do it, okay? All right, cool. Any questions on body position? No? Okay. All right, cutting. Always use a clean cutting mat, of course. Sharp blades, correct tool for the correct job. I have this funny little tool in there, this chopper, I'll show you. Multiple small cuts, which I just talked about, and then creating a jig. So a jig is really, really, really helpful. And you can get a jig like this, chopper jig. This thing's kind of fun. It's like get to be your own little, like, I don't know, what do you call it, a lumber yard. It's awesome. I think it's actually, I don't think I've even opened it. Does that seem right? Yeah. Yeah, you become your own little lumberyard. And what's interesting about it is you see those little like black triangles? Those are called jigs. And those can really make your work a lot easier. Because, for example, look at that thing. Are all the walls exactly the same size? They're exactly the same height, right? Or they should be. Yeah, you tried. So you could create a jig to make them all the same height. And you can do it, this little device here is meant for sticks, making sticks all the same height. You go and you chop them, all exactly the same, and you put them just like you would do, like a little tiny table saw. It's really cute, it's really fun. So but the idea is, has anyone done any woodworking? Yeah, so you always use a jig, right, to make things even and straight. It's the same thing with modeling. This works for sticks. If you're making a jig elsewhere, you can use a piece or whatever, and where's that? Did the knife roll on the floor? Probably. There it is. Like, for example, if I wanted to cut a bunch of pieces that were this shape, first I would cut one and use that, and I would call it T for template. Then I could either draw it over and over and over again. So think methodically about how you might want to do something. Or you can even, sometimes I'll take this and I'll tape it down here, and then when I cut, I'll just start on that line and cut, start on that line and cut, start on that line and cut. I use other things to help me make multiples. Right. So identifying the thing that's consistent, like the height of the walls, you could create one long strip, and then all your other cuts are like toot, 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 right? You're just measuring them. Instead of cutting one square, and then another square, and then another square, right? Like you just cut one strip. I brought this out because this drives me crazy. That, and then there was another one. Oh, that one. That one's the worst. Grab that cardboard with the rectangle cut out of it and just hold it up. Right? So what is silly about that? Why didn't you just use the edge? Yeah, it's like a weird. It cracks me up to my second grader does that all the time, and I'm always like, Winnie, what are you doing? Why'd you cut it? But she's second. She's second grade. She's 9 years old. She's 9 tonight. She's 7.5 years old, so she's allowed. But yeah, don't do that. Use the edge, right? Get a nice straight edge first, and then cut off the edge. Okay, that's gonna help you. Avoid doing that, and that happens when I think you're thinking and you're just not thinking about what you're doing. Okay. And then dispose of blades properly and make sure you put your caps on. Everybody knows that. Do you guys know about blade disposal? Wrap your blades in tape or put them in a little like sharps container. It's really important. My favorite tool is this guy. If you haven't bought a tool, that's the best one. These guys are really great for really tiny stuff. These guys are really great for like those kinds of things where you have to make multiple cuts because you can snap the blades off. They're also like a little bit cheaper and more like versatile for other use. I'm a fan of those, less of a fan of these. These, you know, you stab yourself, and also like the blades dull really fast. Yeah, they're kind of just more for precision stuff. So I have the students buy the other kind. Pasting, clean hands, clean tools. You guys know about paste shields? You know about that? Do you ever get the yellow pages for some reason still in your mailbox? Does everybody get that? Like that little tiny weird yellow pages? Don't throw it away. It's awesome. You use it to paste. So you like glue on a page and then you fold it. And then you use the next page and you fold it. And you use the next page and you fold it like that. And then you never have to worry about getting glue everywhere, which always happens. So you want to avoid like gluing directly on your mat. Like don't put a thing down and glue like this. And then before you know it, like it just glue here, then glue this on your face, you know what I mean? You're just like, it's horrible, right? So use this, you know, open it up, say I'm gluing this thing to this thing, right? I'm gonna glue like that, and say it dribbles a little bit, I pull that up, I flip it, put it back down, and just taste, you know, it just glues to itself. Then you throw the whole book away when you're done. So yeah, that newspaper, newsprints, I just always have like a little stash somewhere. Tape for temporary hold, of course, like having one good, you know, thing of tape is nice because you did your temporary holds with pins. That also works. I find it harder. I don't know. What do you think? It's okay.
Kelly told us to do.
Yeah.
And I
Just did it.
I'll try it.
Yeah, it works. Foam core can be kind of annoying because foam core sometimes like rips off the edge, but the blue tape's usually pretty good with most other materials that won't rip it. Rotate for gravity assist. So like here, this always cracks me up too when people do this. So, you know, you've got four walls. I'm just gonna cut a piece. You need to put 4 walls up in a house or a building or something. And you know, the walls are kind of like the roof is supposed to go like this. I'll watch students just stand there and do this. So like there's other ways, right? Like you could go like this, you know, or like this, you know, is even better because this is gonna give you like a better 90-degree angle. Like remember that you can turn it. Like you don't have to stand and do like this, you know, and then inevitably that's like it's not a 90-degree angle, you know? So just gravity. That's why modeling is so important though, because of gravity in architecture, because otherwise all the computer is like in space, right? Literally in space, there's no gravity. You just think you can build anything. You can't. Anyway. And then of course, patience. Just like take a deep breath, put the glue on there, walk away from it, go get your coffee, come back. Okay, it's probably time, and then put it aside. I like tacky glue a little better than Elmer's. But both will work. Elmer's is good for papery things. Tacky glue is better. The thicker the material gets, you want the tackier you need. So tacky glue, I highly recommend. And then of course, cutting mat. These are all your basic tools that we've talked about. Scale, extra scrap pieces, or like some kind of book to paste, and then the material. And then, like, of course, there's always like extra tools, you know, tweezers are usually really helpful, especially when you start to get to like doing the signs. You're gonna want a little tweezer. Because you've built your outside first, so you're gonna want to be able to like that in there. So tweezers are nice. Scissors half the time, like if you can cut it with scissors, just cut it with scissors. Yeah. Circles are easier with scissors for sure. Blades are really hard to do with a circle. Glue, the eraser, you can get that like tacky eraser that pulls up glue. I like those. Do you know what a bone folder is? I have one. You have one? Oh, geez, you got everything. You don't want to do like me and use your scale as a bone folder. Bone folders are awesome because they can do things like crease edges like this. I use them all the time when I was in art school. They can flatten things out. They're just great. They're a great little tool. And you can get them messy and dirty, and they're real easy to clean, you know? Scissors again, and clamps. Clamps are always nice if you're doing a lot of work. Little tiny clamps are nice, but you guys aren't really using too much of that. So these are just kind of like extra little doodads. Some people like hot glue. I have a real problem with it. It just burn myself every time I use it, and then it just like glue strings everywhere, and so I'm like, okay. Right, measure twice, cut once. Using the edges of the material, not the middle. Be efficient, cut one, and then reuse it as a template. Keep organized. Like this guy, oh my God, I remember in graduate school, there was a guy who he literally had a whole field of things. Like everything was so organized, but his models were exquisite. Like I think he made money later just making models. Very organized. That's like, just like the palette rule. You guys know about the paint palette rule? Your painting looks like your paint palette. If your paint palette's really brown and gray and messy, your painting's gonna get brown and gray and messy. So same thing, if your workspace is nice and pretty, relatively neat, your model will probably be nice and relatively neat. Score and fold when you can is an excellent example here. You just scored it. You didn't have to cut all the way through. You can score and fold. And then just remember to breathe again. Keep breathing. And I think that's it. This is a really great video if you want more. I love this guy. He's like that real type A architect that's he's good at everything. But he also makes these really great videos. So he's very thorough in his understanding of model making. If you want to watch it, you can see it there. Does anyone want to practice? Any questions? Yeah?
So I have a few questions from people who are able to come. And I think the first question, you covered the majority of it in your presentation. And her first question was what kind of tools you use for making models. So yeah, that was really useful. And her second question was, what are some useful materials that are used that maybe aren't the standard? For example, household items, napkins, etc.
Cork is one, like little cork stoppers, cork pieces. A lot of times, let's see, what else do you use? I mean, honestly, if you need to make a cylinder, toilet paper rolls, various other cylinders are kind of tricky to make. And so finding a pre-made cylinder is always nice. It's also kind of interesting. You can take a cylinder, right, and cut a wedge out of it and make a cone and make some different 3D shapes. The cardboard that you get from consumer items is just as good as the cardboard you buy from Blick. There's really no difference. The only difference is the stuff from Blick might be a little less sturdy, but not really. So you don't really need to buy a bunch of stuff. I mean, definitely the outsides here for this model, you're gonna want something that's fairly consistent and thick because that's easier to have it stand out. But for the little things inside, I would encourage you just take cereal boxes apart, use the back. Cereal boxes are great. They have a nice thickness to them. The shine can sometimes resist glue, so you might have to play and use a brush to glue to laminate on a surface. Kind of so you see that model there, the one with the chipboard, not like that one there. Do you see how he kind of covered the cardboard with another type of material? You might end up doing that, and you can get a thicker surface. That's what I would say. Pick popsicle sticks. Just eat a lot of popsicles. Oh, chopsticks, also really useful. The dowel size for that scale, that was pretty big. So, it's like a 2 foot. So the column is as big as that column, if not bigger, if you think about it in the scales we're working with. Any other questions? Yeah? Go ahead.
For stiffer materials like basswood or foam board, do you recommend cutting all the way through or storing and snapping for straight edges?
That's a great question. Definitely have to cut all the way through on foam core. Basswood, I usually cut all the way through. So the only one I snap is polycarbonate. So you would snap, you know what I'm talking about, the plexiglass. You definitely need to snap that and be real careful with that because that can be a real pain and you want to get it just right. I don't use a lot of plexiglass because plexiglass will not hold together with regular glues. It does not do that. In order to make plexiglass hold, I know, you're looking at me like, what?
I bought it just in case.
Just in case. Okay, so if you, this is some nice thin plexi. In order to make this work with regular glues, I've done it a couple ways. You're not going to be able to join it like that. If there's not enough surface area, you're just not going to be able to, meaning there's not enough area here to glue here. Sometimes the way we make flexi work is you actually you create a frame for it. So you could, like when you sandwich it. So sometimes you can create like a frame out of this, cut a little hole in it, and then one side and then the other side, and the thing that's actually glued together are the pieces of the frame. So that you can kind of cheat it like that. Sometimes you can take sandpaper and rough it up along the edge. Then you can kind of get it to glue. Honestly, architects don't usually use it that much because the implication of an opening is that it's a window. It's an implied window. It's an implied void. So we don't spend a lot of time like worrying about this because the amount of freaking time you're gonna, you know what I mean? It's like not worth it. It's like, it doesn't matter really, ultimately. But you guys are making signs, right? So maybe that, maybe if you want transparency in your sign, what are you gonna make out of it? You know?
My favorite is ocean themes. So
Okay.
there's a couple things that have that have an aquarium. I was just thinking.
Yeah, so you need something that likes glass and
I
maybe
mean, I
has
could always
different
print something that
colors.
looks like it, but
Yeah.
like there's also this space right here. Right here that is like supposed to be glass. And I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like put a thing here.
So
I
what you
don't
could
know.
what you could do is you just have to be kind of clever about it.
Yeah.
So you could shove this in between your like hole there, and then you would score that side and shove it in. And that's actually the way glass is installed.
How do you cut that?
How do you cut
I was
this?
scared to cut it.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't know if I could use like.
No, you can totally, no, you can use scissors. What I would do is like your classmate said, you're gonna take this, you're gonna score till it's almost through, and then you're gonna come to like, you need a square edge. And then you're gonna get it right on the square edge, hold it like, sometimes I use another material to hold it nice and flat, and I pull like this, and you're gonna snap, it's gonna snap right off
Kind of
straight.
like when you do like stained glass.
Yes, exactly like that. Yes. But again, like to get it to fit in your model, you're gonna need to be, the foam core is good because you can score the foam core and shove it into the foam core, and then gravity will like hold, it'll like sandwich its way in there, rather than trying to fuss with glue. Because glue is just gonna resist glue. You can use epoxy glues, but then the epoxy glues will melt your foam core, and you might breathe that in, and that's probably not a good thing. I'm a no on epoxy glues. Generally, I'm just like, it's just not worth it. Great question. Any other ones? Yeah. These guys? It takes a while. I have one that's just completely wrecked, and I still use it. I wouldn't use it for fine modeling though. Like this one, I think is fine. It's fine. I mean, it's a little rough right here. It becomes more of a problem if the thinner the material you're working with, right? Because then it might like kind of translate through, and you might get a little lame, We should have enough though at school. Are you thinking about getting one at home?
I already have one.
Oh, you already have one? Is it totally wrecked?
Not totally wrecked.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this a problem?
No, I think it's probably less of a problem than you would perceive it to be. Because I can't imagine we're doing like real, if you're trying to make these all on there just perfectly perfect, then that's one thing. But I doubt you're kind of working at that scale. Yeah, you're probably fine. Go ahead.
Would you recommend tacky glue for foam core, or is there something else that you would recommend?
I think tacky holds together with Elmer's or foam core holds together with tacky or Elmer's. It's fine. Yeah, it's pretty sticky stuff because it's got like this foaminess to it. I mean, the outside. What do you guys think? Did you use some foam core? I think tacky, just like all the way. Yeah, it's just way easier.
You don't use pins at all?
No, I use tape. Nope, we buy expensive drafting dots. Don't need to buy. And I hold everything together with these little guys because I love them. And this like a luxury. It's like a luxury item. Here's so stupid. It's just masking tape in a dot. And it costs so much money. Like 5 times more than masking tape. But you know how it is when you really like something. Yeah, so I just go like this and I just like masking tape it around. And I use them, and this is way better. Like, because these, to me, this is just like, oh my God, I'm gonna pull it all off. As soon as I start taking these pins out, I'm gonna have holes everywhere. Like, I'm very unhappy with it. I'd be very unhappy with it. One thing you could do if you are unhappy with the way it looks, like, I'm just gonna pick on yours because you've got it. Okay. If you don't like the way this looks, then what we kind of discovered in 25 is you can just clad it with the thin, hand me that thin chip board there. This up underneath. And similar to the way that person, yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, that's like if you know, because the corners aren't real nice, right? And that's normal. Like when you're modeling, you're not really sure. You can just come back, get a brush roll your tacky, get the size just right, you know, and you can come back and kind of flat it, and that would look real nice.
I was thinking of covering it in paint, or not paint, but like paint strips. Just weird kind of.
Oh, that's fun for the inside.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, that's what she kind of gave us.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Instead of like painting it or like coloring it.
Yeah,
just, like,
use colored.
color that's
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Because painting it, none of these materials take paint very well. Acrylic paint, if you put too much water in it, it starts to bubble and then it looks like garbage. But for are you doing the inside and the outside?
I could do the outside if that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if not, you know, this could be your like generic material for the outside. The inside you could keep white because it's also like you've done a bunch of nice. It's funny, you definitely prioritize the inside. All your inside corners are really clean, and all your outside. But that's good. Like all your out. Well, good. Good for you. You're like, yeah, I did that on purpose. I meant to emphasize the inside. This is an interior project. Yeah. Yeah. It looks good.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have any online resources you recommend for templates and tutorials to make assets?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you have any online resources you recommend for templates and tutorials to make assets?
Assets? What do you mean by assets? Oh.
Yeah. Like maybe like objects, like
Entourage.
furniture?
We call them entourage, but yeah, assets. I get it now. Okay.
You could
I would just buy them.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I
for,
would
like,
go to.
digital? For digital?
No.
Do we have to do digital renderings too?
Oh, then I would do those in SketchUp. And there's like a jillion assets in SketchUp, and half of them are
Is
garbage.
there any other app that would be just for like, not 3D modeling per se, like kind of 3D modeling, but not,
Like isometric.
yeah. Like what, do you guys ever
Isometric.
use something on Adobe, like Adobe related? Because in the program we're like total Adobe, we use everything
Everything Adobe.
in graphic design, so is there anything kind of parallel to that?
Yes. And you're looking for, I don't know if it goes 3D though. Like your views will be flat. Or I guess you could take a picture of your model in 3D and put that in.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking about doing? And putting it into Photoshop or Adobe?
Maybe.
Because in order to make a three-dimensional model, we typically use SketchUp, and I don't think Adobe I mean, they might have a 3D.
You can do 3D rendering in
creator.
Photoshop, but it's obviously not like the same like type as SketchUp. 'Cause you're just
Yeah.
coming up with the programs. The thing is, I think, like correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you also have the option to do 3D rendering or like a 2D rendering, just like with depth. in
Yeah,
it,
with
what
depth
have
in
you.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we would typically
Yeah,
do
that's
it.
what I was wondering.
Okay, yes, there's a guy, and now I'm blanking his name. Show It Better. Let's look it up. I'll show you. Show It
Ooh.
Better is amazing. This guy, he is all about architectural rendering, and he's got some great tutorials. He's got some YouTube tutorials, all kinds of things. He also has entourage packs. He has entourage packs that are like, we call it entourage, same thing with assets. Some are free, some are not free. He's got, how to do section. Here we go. Collage furniture pack, for example. He's got ones that are like stylistically, like each other. He's got ones that are more photographic. I'm trying to think about other like resources I have that are free. It's funny. For a while there were a ton of them online that were free, and then they all got like new paywalls. So, and I have like a bunch that I took from like 2015 that I just have on a server. I suppose I could share it with you, but most of it's like trees, and I don't think I have a lot of furniture. I have like trees and outdoor landscaping objects for some reason, and it was like a CD we bought. And it was all these like photographs with like the background already cut out. Is that what you guys are looking for? Easy to drag and drop, add entourage to the image. Is that what you need? Is that what that person needs?
Are those 3D models or just like?
No, they're
They're just
two-dimensional
photographs.
photographs. You need to put them into your Photoshop image, kind of, kind of skew the perspective a little bit on them, but they look pretty good. No.
I think that's what, she was referring to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise, you have to 3D model it, and SketchUp's the best option for that. And you can get SketchUp for free, and all the assets are free. It's just that half of them are garbage, so you have to like go through this kind of like uncurated album of like garbage to find good stuff. Yeah, but it's free. Get what you pay for. Any other questions? Yeah, yeah.
This is kind of a dumb question. So for
No,
this
there are no
specific,
questions.
well, for this specific model, is this just 3 layers of cardboard?
That's all it is.
Got you.
And usually we would typically ask for more. So how many layers did we do? Like 20? I think it was 16.
2 inches.
Right, for 2 inches. So you see the base of that one, it was done, so that one's actually, the base isn't, it's not deep enough. Typically you want something that grounds your model. So, and it makes the model look better. It is kind of a pain, but it's often what you do when you're like waiting for something else to dry. You're like, let me work on the base, you know, and then you like have your base all cut out. You get, you know, encyclopedias, and you just, you know, the one trick about that when you're using this, make sure, just like any type of lamination, I recommend a brush, but you really want to get the glue on all the edges, you know, like they taught you in art school. So like make sure, you know, art class, like all the edges, you know, fair amount of glue on there. Okay. But yeah, I would probably add another one. I think it'll make it feel heavier and sturdier. It also, these might warp. This one seems, foam core is pretty stable, but like once you start to glue things on the top, the stress of the glue starts to pull the thing into like tension, and so sometimes your bottom starts to be like that, and it doesn't look very good. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, you can ask.
Yeah. So, do you go like room by room when it comes to like starting gluing everything? Like, do you do the walls and then the floor, or do you do like a wall and then you do the floor and then build from there?
That's a good question. So for this model, you guys, looks like you already printed out the space, so you have a plan. Are you going to keep the plan like this, or are you going to include flooring? Do you know?
Oh, we're
Because-
keeping the floor like that probably. We're just,
Yeah.
I mean,
You're adding interior walls.
yeah.
You're adding
Yeah,
interior-
if we
interior
want.
walls. But you, like, are you going to design like, well, I guess you could. There's no reason why the design couldn't turn and hit the floor, right? Like color.
Yeah, we probably added 2 that's for this.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, that little that video he actually responded to that very question and said like, you know, I usually don't do this kind of model. I usually end up finishing it out because it just looks a little more diagrammatic like this. It doesn't look as finished, but it's up to you. It's done both ways. It's a little tricky. Before you start building walls, you could cut this back out. Like you could spray mount this, but not permanently. What do you think though? What do you guys gonna do on your floor? Because it makes a big difference in the space. Because look, even here they did it. It's goofy like tile, like really, some, you know, these are all not a good example. I think this is where they had to trench through the wood. They didn't have enough for the same tile. But you know, a lot of times it's design. If you go in Mariposa, there is a design, you know, on the floor. There is actually a design. It's not very good design. It's a design. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Kind of,
I
sort
might have
of.
explained it a little wrong. I'm just talking about like do it like room by room, or like.
All right, architects, what would you say for this project? Would you do the walls, miter the corners first, and then glue it down, or would you glue it down right onto there, and then miter and put?
In projects in the past, I always try to cut out as many pieces that I knew, and then miter them, and then fit them together, and then glue. Gluing was last.
Yeah,
But
gluing is
sometimes you don't know what size a piece needs to be, so it's kind of like cut glue, cut glue. It's just kind of how the build is formed.
Yeah, great answer. That's exactly, I would agree with you. And so I probably would glue it to this last, unless, because you're not doing anything that's like super structurally confusing, and that will allow you to miter the corners. Both of them, by the way, had amazing models, so they're good consultants. Really good models in that class.
Where do you find typical modeling materials locally? It's just like Flicks or
I think Blick has it, Michaels has some, I think the bookstore had a little bit, right? The bookstore definitely has the cutting tools and the scales, and like, I think they even have a ruler with a cork back on it. You really want, oh, that's the other thing. So this is a bad example because you really want one with a cork back. That's gonna save your fingers. There's also little L shapes you can get with a cork back. I like those too. It won't have the T-square part, it'll just be a ruler. Yeah, that's probably the easiest. I wish we could lend some to you, but I all walked off. Our new order hasn't even arrived yet, so yeah. I know. That's supposed to be let you guys up. But yeah.
Like, what do we do about things that we may want to hang? Like, because I have a thing that has hanging things.
Oh, like you want to hang in the space?
Like from,
Yeah,
it
from
would
the
be
ceiling.
from the ceiling.
It's like technically it's coming from the ceiling.
Oh, you gotta put a beam up. You gotta put a
I
thingy.
have- It's basically fiber optic strings hanging down, and they'd be coming from like the top. So when I talked about it with Kelly, she was telling me maybe like a grid, which I got this kind of thing.
Yep.
Then what do I do?
Sound. Yeah.
What do I do now?
Got that, and then I would take, hand me a couple sticks. Hand me like maybe the thicker ones. Maybe those are too bad, I think. Maybe a couple of thicker ones. Like some sticks. I would make a frame for it,
Okay.
right? Like in your little model, yeah. And then, you know, let's see, do you want a whole room? And you got it, this is good. You guys are learning architecture, so
Because I was
Good
gonna
one.
do it kind of like in here.
perfect. You probably don't even need that then. You
Because
could-
I could probably
yeah, you
just
don't
set
even
it.
need the structure.
Okay.
Yeah, just set it like that.
Okay.
That's gonna look cool. And then you could actually, what I would do is I would use embroidery thread. Because you could use 1,000 different
Okay.
colors, right? And I guess the idea is that it's colorful and it's like pulling
Yeah, I
light.
got these little strings.
Yeah.
The embroidery. I guess.
Yeah. So color,
can go there.
okay in our models.
I have
Yeah,
like-
there you go.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can
So I just tie it,
Because
right?
I tie them, and I would, you know, maybe split those into their, like, because if you think about it, a fiber optic cable is tiny,
Yeah.
right? Like it's smaller than that even, probably. It's probably worth it. Tie them through, get the length right, you
Okay.
know. It's gonna look really cool. You could do
Okay.
2 per tie, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that
If
idea.
if I needed to stand it up, say it's not in that hallway, and it doesn't have the things to stand it up, like the walls already.
Yeah, you would have to do the structure.
Okay.
So you'd have to decide, like, let's say you want it right here in the middle.
Okay.
Well, you probably need a beam there, so you need some kind of piece of wood that goes there,
Okay.
some kind of piece of wood that goes there, and then this thing's real floppy, as it would be actually.
Yeah.
The grid is floppy, so you would need to put a piece like there and a piece like there. So you have to put a little frame for it
Okay.
first, and then you glue that on. Well, then you tie everything, and then you glue it on top.
Put it on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything, yeah. Yeah, so that's why model making is so powerful though, because, you know, the computer, you would just make a grid, and then you would fight about making the cables because you'd be like, Rhino, do I use Rhino? Like, what do I do to make this? Do I like Photoshop it? I don't know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It'd be frustrating. So you're gonna get something that looks a lot like what you actually want to create in
Okay.
reality, because you would need to structure this, and so it would actually have structure underneath it.
Okay.
And you would see that in the ceiling when you created it. So that becomes a design problem. Like, do I want the structure? Do I, you know, how often do I have to put a little beam? It might be a series of beams that go like this, and one that goes like this, and then the grid sits on top, and that affects the way the overall thing looks. So you have,
Okay.
forces you to think through all those problems.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that idea though.
Okay.
And I think, so I think with color, you guys are definitely using color in this project, right?
Yes.
I would say less is more typically. And that models at this scale often benefit from only putting color where the design idea is. So your design idea is about these fiber optic cables, that gets color. Other things should kind of not, like you might make a choice to not include a color, even if it's at the secondary or tertiary to your design. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because otherwise it just gets like, it's almost like overwhelming, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? That's a great question.
So there are some structures or some walls in this floor plan that are permanent, but other ones are like removable or we can add in our walls and stuff. So in the case that we wanted to do curved walls, what material would you recommend using for the wall? Because like curving cardboard is kind of
pain.
difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain. Let's see. let's try this. I think this guy, this thickness of, this one's gonna wanna curve. The way you make things curve is you do a series of scored lines. So I'm gonna borrow your little thingy again, real quick, to make sure my body is correctly over this. First, I'm gonna cut out the whole shape, because if I don't cut out the whole shape, it's not gonna, your scores are gonna be funky. There we go. So that'll be your wall, and that should be, it's a little too tall, but you get the idea. This would curve probably okay, but to make it curve maybe sharper, you basically do a series of scores. And so you can actually do this with cardboard, and you can pull out the inside. So maybe I'll show you that next. But I would probably just use something like this. How thick are these walls that you can like create on your own?
Actually, no. Did she explain? Like the walls that, because you know you can sort of like add and take away walls. Were those walls already like maybe the set
Oh, I'm pretty sure we could design because I told her like I want to add a wall here, and she's like,
Okay.
So this will help you basically do the same concept with any material, but you create a series of scores, and then that could either go on the inside or the outside, but it helps you make the curve you want to make.
Okay.
Otherwise, this thing's going to want to curve the way it's going to want to curve. But yeah, and you can do that like with cardboard. What you sometimes have to do is like rip the strips out of the middle because it doesn't want to turn. But yeah, and actually, it's funny. That's actually how you make it out of plywood.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy? So they go to a route, they take 4x8 sheets of plywood and they run it on a routing table, and they basically route like 1/2-inch lines in it or 1/4-inch lines, and then the whole plywood will bend. It's pretty wild, right? And chipboard too, same thing. You have to score it. Yeah, that's what I love about model making, because it's the closest thing to actual construction, which is the closest thing to actual reality. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, you guys are welcome to always come to my office hours. They are Monday from 1 to 3 in person at 5003 Mariposa, so right next to the design office. The middle of the semester is great because I don't have a lot of people. End of the semester is impossible, so don't try. Because we just have too many advisees. They also have them online, although I don't think that would be as helpful. So, but you're welcome to like come bring your model and like take a peek at it and like talk about it. So I love doing this kind of stuff. So yeah, cool. Does everybody get what is this what you were expecting? Yeah. I wasn't sure. You're like, let's talk about some model making, you know? Okay, good deal. All right. Well, thank you so much.